We're grateful to be joined by Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Nerona.
Good to be with you, Ryan.
Thank you for having us. You spent 6 years as the AG in Rhode Island and previously 8 years as the U.S. Attorney for District of Rhode Island. Former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon has a phrase. He calls it flooding the zone. With so much going on at the federal level, what should people be focused on?
I think they should be focused on the effort by the president to sideline the Congress and undermine the judiciary, and thereby attempting to put all of power granted by the Constitution in his hands. You know, the founders of our democracy wanted there to be competing pressures so that no one branch of government would become so powerful that Americans would lose their freedoms. And that's worked for 250 years. The president has effectively decided to dismantle it. I mean, I think in my position as AG, that became clear to me very quickly when he sidelined the Congress when it came to spending authorized by the Congress. And then when courts rightly agreed with us, attorneys general, including right here in Rhode Island, that that was unlawful, then with his vice president and Mr. Musk sought to undermine the judiciary. So by sidelining the Congress and undermining the judiciary, authority has been, in his mind, he's attempting to concentrate that power in his hands, and that's very dangerous for our democracy.
And with so much going on at the federal level, here locally, how much of your time here as the Attorney General has been devoted to focusing on those federal lawsuits, and how much has been kind of focused on what's going on here locally? Has that kind of dominated your time recently?
In my personal time, I would say that it has dominated that and ensuring that 2 local hospitals emerge from bankruptcy in a way that give them a chance to come back. So those have been my 2 principal focuses, for the first part of this year. But there's no question that our focus has had to change because of the president's efforts to concentrate power in his hands along the lines that I've described, because he's doing it in a way that harms Rhode Islanders. When he stops federal funding for things like healthcare and education and road construction and law enforcement. Say, for example, he stopped funding for the state police task forces that go after drug traffickers. When the president took those steps in violation of the authorities that are granted to him by the Constitution, he impacted Rhode Islanders in a negative way. It was important for us to step up. I'm grateful that we're ready. Steve Bannon may have flooded the zone in his mind, but not for us. We were ready. The attorneys general working together have built the largest, best law firm in the country, and we are ready for this moment. The work, I believe, has demonstrated that. We've had near universal success in the suits that we've brought, and I expect we'll continue to have that success. The only danger that I see in that context, in terms of our judicial success, is what I mentioned earlier, which is the president and people associated with him, including the vice president, undermining those courts because they're not coming out the way he likes.
As I'm sure you're well aware, Judge McConnell has been under attack by Elon Musk this week over his ruling in one of your suits. Do you think we can get back to a point in our country where people trust the judiciary to be independent?
Yeah, I think most Americans do trust it. I think this is the danger, though, with having people at the level of the presidency undermining those courts. It's the first time in our history, maybe the second time, because Andrew Jackson undermined the Supreme Court as well. But absent his example, more than 150 years ago, this is the first time in my memory that a president and people so closely associated with him have tried to undermine another branch of government in this way. It's astounding to me that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has not been more vocal about those efforts. He should be out in front, in my opinion. Chief Justice Roberts, he oversees the court system. He knows that the courts are operating in a fair manner. You may not agree with every decision, but that's why we have appellate courts. That's the way the system is set up. And the Supreme Court ruled almost 250 years ago, in 1803, that it's the Supreme Court that is the final decider of what the law is, not any other branch of government. And that includes the lower courts the lower course of the decider of what the law is, unless the Supreme Court takes it up. And so I'm very concerned about it. But I do think that Donald Trump, even in his first term, made it acceptable that our leaders can leave the truth at the doorstep and walk into a world of fantasy and try to convince the American people that that fantasy is real. And I think that's another real danger to our democracy. When our leaders don't speak truth, that's a problem.
How do we go about restoring that trust?
Yeah, look, I think it starts with, this president just can't be, in my mind, rehabilitated in a way to understand and respect democracy. He's way past that point. His presidency is as much a revenge tour as it is an attempt to govern. I think the change begins when Republicans, who control both houses of Congress, stand up and do their job, which is to tell the president, look, we have the power of the purse under the Constitution. Stop interfering in our space. You do your thing, we'll do ours. And there's no reason not to do that. So we talk a lot about, or you hear a lot of talk about, well, the president's trying to save money by these changes. Well, there's a means by which you can do that under the Constitution and under the laws of our country, which is go back to Congress and ask for what's called a rescission. And he controls both houses of Congress. He doesn't want to wait or utilize that process. Why? Because he doesn't care about what the Congress thinks. What he cares about is what he thinks, and that's not the way our democracy is set up. So I don't think we can salvage democracy if we're relying on Donald Trump to do that. I think Americans have to see him for what he is, and I think that has increasingly happened, and that will continue the more he departs from sensible thinking. And the next chance to change the dynamic of power, the balance of power in Washington, at least with respect to parties, is in the midterm elections coming up in just under 2 years. And then in 4 years, elect a president that understands what democracy means. I think there are lots of federal institutions that are going to need fixing by that point. The Justice Department, where I spent a good portion of my career as an assistant U.S. attorney and the U.S. attorney, about 15 years. I mean, I think veterans of the Justice Department have been, over the course of history, really proud of that institution and our ability to serve there. That department, its credibility has been more than undermined, it's been eliminated. It's going to have to be rebuilt, and I'm sure that's going to be true across our government.
All that being said, over 77 million Americans voted for President Trump. Mm-hmm. In your mind, is there any redeeming qualities in what his administration has done so far?
No, I can't look at a single thing that the president has done. So let's talk about what he's done. When it comes to foreign aid, take one example, a company in Quonset, Adizia, feeds 5 million malnourished children in sub-Saharan Africa every year. I think as Americans, we should be proud of that work. The president has done everything he can to undermine the work of that company and companies like it all across this country, which also impacts American farmers and food producers and others. He has destroyed our reputation abroad by his bizarre, at best, press conference in the Oval Office with President Zelensky of the Ukraine. Our allies are former allies, current allies are trying to figure out how to navigate a world with Vladimir Putin and his despotism and aggressiveness and aggression without the United States as an ally. That is a very dangerous world that we're living in. The president is trying to move us to an authoritarian form of government where he holds all the power, as we've discussed. So no, I don't think there's anything that he's done that I would applaud. The truth is, as an assistant U.S. attorney, I worked for both Republican and Democratic presidents, but I don't view the president as a Republican any longer. I view him as an authoritarian, and I think those 77 million, at least some of them, are going to have buyer's remorse pretty soon if they're not having it already.
And how do you reach those people?
Because they're going to want an alternative to him and his chaos when they feel the pain. A lot of Americans voted for Donald Trump because they thought he would end the war of in Ukraine right away. Complete fail. They voted for him because they thought he would end inflation on day one. These are his words. Complete fail. They thought that his tariffs would be good for America. clearly going to be a complete fail. Energy prices going up, cost of goods going up, cost of automobiles going up. So in a sense, Donald Trump is going to do the persuading by his policies that are going to make life for Americans less pleasant. Leave aside what he is doing by threatening, he and the Congress, by threatening, for example, Medicaid coverage. I mean, 1/3 of the people in the state are on Medicaid. They're not all immigrants. You know, they're men and women who are working hard. They are not undocumented immigrants. It's 1/3 of our population is on Medicaid. If those people lose their health care because of the anticipated Republican and the president's Medicaid cuts, you're going to have 300,000 people or so on the street with no health care, okay? So they can't afford it, and they won't have it. They're still going to need treatment. Our hospital systems are going to have to care for them with no revenue, and just the drop in revenue, loss in revenue to our healthcare system, already in crisis alone, is going to cause that healthcare system to collapse. If people think an 18-hour wait in an emergency room at the Merriam's bad now, wait until we lose Medicaid coverage. It's going to be 2 or 3 times that. So if there's an ER there at all. So look, the president's going to make his own argument as to why his policies are bad, because it's going to affect Americans in ways that they haven't seen yet. But when they see it, it's going to be very painful.
Switching gears a little bit, but sticking closer to home, Governor Dan McKee announced his bid for re-election this week. Do you plan to run?
I'm not sure yet. You know, I feel like there's support out there for me if I wanted to choose that path. I don't think that Governor McKee, frankly, has led the state in a way where we are maximizing our potential. I don't think he's the person to push back against the Trump administration. I don't think he's the person to fix our economy or our healthcare system. I think at best, he's been a caretaker governor and not a particularly good one. So I think certainly change is necessary. Whether or not I intend to try to bring that change, I think I'll probably have decided by the summer, but there's no question that particularly given the work that we've been doing with respect to the administration, 2 years from now, someone's going to have to continue to lead that work. I don't know who my successor is going to be here. I feel at that point, I'll be ready for that work because I'm ready for it right now. And Rhode Island, I'm sure, will need somebody then who will be able to push back against the administration. President Trump is not a person that you can negotiate with. You can't negotiate with him, at least not from a position of weakness. And he views an unwillingness to push back as weakness. And so you can only deal with a bully, which is what Donald Trump is, by punching back. And then maybe getting to a place where you may be able to deal with one another. But as Donald Trump told Governor Mills, with Governor McKee sitting there, frankly, silently, told Governor Mills, I am federal law. Well, the president's not federal law. First of all, Congress passes the laws of this country, and the president doesn't make the law. He has to follow it as well. So I think Rhode Island is going to need a fighter in 2026. I'm confident Governor McKee's not that person. I think Rhode Island needs that person, and so we'll see whether or not I decide to throw my hat in the ring and see what the voters have thought of my leadership over the last 6 years in this job and the 8 years I spent as U.S. Attorney.
Do you see yourself under any circumstances supporting Governor McKee?
I think based on the answer I just gave you, I think this answer probably will be no surprise. No, I would not support Governor McKee under any circumstances.
In his campaign ad, he made it very clear that he's going to be somebody that's going to combat against what the Trump administration is trying to do. Do you think that's an effective strategy, kind of driving that wedge further between the two sides?
Well, look, I think that someone's going to have to fight back against the Trump administration. I just don't think the governor's words have any meaning. This is a guy who was going to the inauguration. This is a guy who the governor said in the first couple of weeks that he thought things were going well, and then he started to have concerns. And then it was only when the fight was already joined that all of a sudden he's a fighter. My office with my fellow attorneys general have been in the fight from day one. I don't know where the governor's been, but he certainly hasn't been fighting alongside us. So I'm not quite sure what he meant by that. You know, I think Rhode Islanders can judge by action and not by words. And on that score, you know, I think we're doing pretty well here.
All right, well, Mr. Attorney General, we really appreciate the time. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good to be with you.